Hey Mo,
Hey, Ricky.
the doctor is in.
Yes, yes, we are. It's like a family reunion
I
here tonight.
know. Look at this.
We got like all stars and favorites and friends and new stars and it's all for a really really great topic talking about bone health. It really is all
Wow.
about the break. You don't realize how important bone health is until you have an injury, and it's something
Right,
that's on the mind of so many cancer patients and survivors and
right.
just it's a normal process. I think that we might experience some loss of bone density, but there are things we can do, things we should know, and we got experts here to talk about it. So let's do it.
Let's do it. I know. I thought about like, what if I broke a bone? I wouldn't be able to walk Harper. I wouldn't be able to go to the bathroom in the house. I wouldn't be able to like do anything, right? I couldn't drive, couldn't paddleboard. Like you don't think of it, we take it for granted. So these are some rock stars here. We have our awesome Dr. Keith, and he does the Love Your Bone show with me now, on Sundays, for Sundays. And our Reverend Dr. Tammy Denise from Carrie's Touch, who is like celebrating pink every day with pink hair. I'm loving it so much. And my bestie, breastie Melissa, my first TNBC friend who I love dearly, and Susan Fushino, who is an osteoporosis patient that has a story that's going to blow your mind. And then rounding it out with Claire Gill, who is the bone queen of the world. If there's a question about bones, she can answer it. So let's go. I mean, do you think we should start with Susan's story? I think that will like illustrate what we're talking about. And then we can let the experts kind of weigh in. Because Susan's
Yeah,
story is like
I
crazy.
do. Let's do Susan, and then let's talk about actually how bones grow and develop and what is osteoporosis. But yeah, let's hear Susan's story first because you're right, it puts it in perspective.
But yeah, it's like she brings it. So Susan, my new friend, I love you. I met her a couple of weeks ago and she's a jewel.
I know, I miss you.
Yeah.
We have to plan a trip. I tried to condense my story because my story could take the whole hour. I'm 51 now. I was 47 at the time, so 4 years ago. No history of osteoporosis in my family at all. I was a teacher for 24 and a half years, taught elementary school. I'm married. I have a daughter who's 24. Just started experiencing discomfort in my back, and it progressively just got worse and worse to the point that I literally could not walk. I went to school on a Friday. I remember being in pain and I never returned. I just had so much pain and nobody knew what was going on. Went for an x-ray. The x-ray showed 7 compression fractures. And I had never heard the word compression fracture before in my life, which ended up actually being 11 compression fractures before this was all over. The pain, I can't even explain the pain. How it changes your life. I couldn't walk. I slept on the couch. My husband and daughter like literally lifted me up while I screamed so I could go to the bathroom. The pain was excruciating. Nothing worked. I was getting no answers. I did have a DEXA scan locally from my family doctor, and it showed severe osteoporosis in my spine, negative 3.4, I think it was. But no answers. It was like, I don't know why you're in pain. I don't know why you have osteoporosis. So like for weeks, I was just like laying here on a heating pad, taking pain pills and feeling terrible. I mean, I didn't feel good at all. I had no direction. So I'm kind of like a take charge person. That like 3 months later, I literally woke up one morning and said to my husband, I want you to drive me to Pittsburgh to Allegheny General Hospital, which is about 2 hours away from me, because we're bound to see some specialists there, and we're bound to see somebody who can give me direction. So we did that. We're fortunate enough that, we went there and they recommended I see an endocrinologist. They confirmed about all these breaks. They told me I should see like a neurosurgeon. They did leave me that day with a back brace, like a temporary back brace, which was at least something, because up until that point, I had nothing. They got me in contact with an endocrinologist in Pittsburgh as well. and he did lots of tests to try to figure out what is going on with this woman. Why does she have it? And it turns out that I've learned there are many reasons why you can get osteoporosis. In my case, it was a little complex. First reason was I had a hysterectomy when I was 39 years old. So that was a factor. Second thing was during this time period, prior to being diagnosed with osteoporosis, I had a doctor diagnose me with lupus, which was a misdiagnosis. And he gave me steroid injections and high doses of oral steroids that I was on. And through all of this, I went to a different doctor in Pittsburgh, the Lupus Center for Excellence, and that woman said, you do not have lupus. So I had a misdiagnosis in there. And I also, through the endocrinologist, found out that I had some parathyroid tumors. Parathyroids control the calcium in your body. It was taking it from my bones, putting it in my blood. So they found it through lab work. I had to have 2 different surgeries to remove the tumors. Once all of my levels balanced out, and truthfully, what I'm talking about there, that was probably a 2.5-year process to get to that point. But my endocrinologist, who I had tons of faith in Pittsburgh, said to me, you know, you're young. We obviously don't want you to have more breaks in your back. So we're going to pull out the big guns. Those were his words. And he mentioned a newer medication called Evenity, which can rapidly build bone. And at that point, I didn't want to just take a mediocre medicine. I wanted the big guns. So I had injections, that was fall of 2020, had injections once a month for a year. And then I just had a DEXA scan done this past June with good results. My spine improved 14.6%, which is significant. We even said that in the report. But looking back on all of this, like the damage is done. Like we can't go back and change anything, although I really wish we could, because I live in constant pain. You know, my life has changed. My life for my family has changed. I've really right now, my struggle is with pain management, seeing doctors, trying to find something that works. I've tried it all, acupuncture, muscle relaxers. We even joke, Ricky, that we literally took out a loan and put in a pool last year. And we live in Pennsylvania, so that's not really a smart move. But being in water really does help relieve my pain. I shrunk 2 inches in my midsection because of that. So
Wow.
no matter the cause, because there are multiple causes that can contribute to osteoporosis, more needs to be done with prevention. A DEXA scan is a very simple test that measures bone density. It's very easy. It's not difficult. And why people can't get them at a younger age, I don't know. So that's my story in summary. I could dominate the whole conversation here, but there's so much to be said about it from all of you.
Whoa, I have so many questions.
That is
I'm
so powerful.
I'm sure we all do. That's so crazy. But so for the 2.5 years that you were going through all this stuff, was anyone giving you anything for pain? Was the pain still there for 2.5 years?
The pain is still there now. I'm sitting, I have a cushion and a heating pad behind me. They would prescribe me pills. Nothing truly worked. I mean, yes, I'd take an opioid and it would work for 2 hours. But then the side effects, you know, headaches, not feeling well, muscle relaxers, physical therapy. I have tried pain patches, like prescription ones, over the counter ones. I really have tried every option. And now I kind of have learned to live with the pain. I have a short window of time that I try to get a few things done in the morning. But really, like since noon today, I've been in pain. Before I even I'm gonna start crying. Before I even started, I was laying on my adjustable bed on heat. It's your life changes so much. And I know it's not cancer, but it's a disease that I feel like isn't taken seriously.
Still debilitating though. Are you a candidate? Has anybody talked to you about kyphoplasty or ways to sort of maybe replace some of that volume or bolster the spinal column so that you can get some more relief? Are those options for you or not at this point?
Well, I did see an orthopedic doctor initially,
Mm.
and because my bones were so fragile and brittle, they didn't want to put the cement in for risk of breaking the few good ones that I did have. And I actually went back to an orthopedic doctor this summer, just begging for something. So can't you do anything to help me? And he was a wonderful, honest surgeon. He operates for a living. He could have said, let's try this or that. But he said surgically, there's nothing that can be done at this point. So find what works.
Mm.
Hey, docs, can you
You-
explain what a compression fracture is to people? She talked about she had 11 compression fractures. Can you explain what that is?
Was it
One of
me?
you, one of you docs.
Oh, okay. The way the way to describe it is your spine is made up of segments of bone. And all of a sudden, if the bone fractures or weakens, it shrinks. So the compression or the weight of your torso and your body, let me go back. Your bones in your body support your muscles and they allow you to stand erect. So there's a lot of weight on it, and the weight is up and down. So if the bones are weakened, now you do have cushions between them, but if the bones are weakened, they start to crunch. And that's that
Backbone,
compression
like this bone back here.
Yeah. Yeah. And so with 11 and a 2-inch drop in your torso, that's significant. And so what's happening now is that once it drops, it pinches the nerve. And when it pinches the nerve, severe pain. And so you try, that device where you can be upside down and hang and kind of stretch out your muscles that way. That may relieve some, but like you said, that once you're sitting back up, the pressure is still crunching down like an accordion, crunching down and then pinching those nerves, and all those nerves will then kind of distribute pain throughout your torso area, especially unless you have something in your lower back, which is that area is very large, those bones there, but it still can be compressed. And when it's compressed, then you start to experience pain that radiates or travels down your legs. So, but it wish and people could really understand how courageous,
Oh,
how much of
gosh.
a trooper you are, because you're going through a lot and you're here telling us about it. And so I just want to commend you for just taking that time to share your story. And I had a quick question. You said he brought out the big guns. What were the big guns?
The big guns were Evenity,
Mhm.
followed up by Prolia. So I did the Evenity, which is the
Mhm.
rapid bone building injections.
Mhm.
And then once I finished 12 months of that, Prolia, I'm on twice a year to maintain the growth that I have.
What about your parathyroids and the parathyroid adenomas they found?
Parathyroid adenomas. I could write a book here. Prior to all of that, I had 2 kidney stones during all of this as well.
Right.
Not knowing, because my blood calcium was all mixed up. So I had to be taken to the emergency room twice and had them surgically removed. But I had one parathyroid surgery that was unsuccessful because apparently parathyroid surgeries are extremely difficult.
Mhm.
So then they sent me to Cleveland Clinic to the chief endocrine surgeon there, who did so many tests on my neck prior to doing the surgery, because he wanted to make sure he was going to hone in on the right area of my neck where the tumors were. And he was successful. Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
Can you explain that, Mo? Like, what's she talking about? The parathyroid, what is that?
Sure. So the parathyroid glands are these little tiny glands, smaller than a pencil eraser, that sit on the sides of your thyroid gland. And your thyroid is responsible for your metabolism, right? And the parathyroids are responsible for helping to maintain the calcium levels in the bloodstream. So when the parathyroid glands are overactive, or a tumor is making too much of that hormone, it tells the bones to release the calcium.
Right.
And so it's like opening the floodgates, and it's saying, okay, release the hounds. And guess what? The calcium goes out, and that's causes the bones to lose their density and their hardness, you know? And it's a vicious cycle, because sometimes cancers can cause our parathyroid hormone. They can release a parathyroid-like hormone that mimics it. Sometimes cancers can affect that parathyroid. Kidney disease can affect it. So there's lots of different ways that the body tries to regulate and keep the calcium in, and it can lead sometimes to too much calcium or sometimes not enough calcium. And both of those can cause, you know, those compression fractures. I tell patients it's like crushing a soda can. You know, when you think about how a soda can crumples right in the middle part, it creates that sort of a painful phenomenon. You know, Dr. Keith is right in that. It's hard to function when you're in pain. It's hard to think straight, hard to tell your story and do your daily activities. And, you know, Susan, this is just, it really is an incredible testament what you've been through and how you're able to speak about it, because a lot of people don't, you know?
And you, so,
Bless you.
well, Dr. Mo, there's one other thing is it's like this balance. I mean, you had two medical problems going on at the same time. You had the parathyroid increasing the level of calcium in the blood, which then gave rise to those kidney stones. And then the calcium had to come from someplace. So it was pulling that from your spine.
Mm.
And Dr. Mo, help me, because I would just think, where are we going wrong? Because earlier on, where's the role of the primary care doctor in doing
Hello.
physical exam?
Boy, well, you know, the primary care doctor is doing this, type, 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 type. And they're saying, okay, you're here for a cough or a sneeze. And they're, you know, the way primary care is delivered now is part of the problem, that there isn't always this sort of whole body approach. There isn't that, hey, you know, Susan, you look a little shorter, or let's measure your height, right? I don't know that we still measure height in a PCP office. You might or might not get your blood pressure taken. You might get weighed, you might not. And I think that there's a lot of variability in the standard of what primary care does, but it's why I know in the oncology practice, we're very careful. I always ask, where are we with routine preventive health maintenance things? When was your last DEXA scan? When was your last colonoscopy? It's not just my job to do the breast exam, you know, and from the cancer standpoint, we understand that everything else is kind of connected and can throw that whole cancer dynamic off balance, but the PCP is just trying to stem the tide. And I think there's a lot of room for education on even who's at risk for osteoporosis, because I know that I have heard in our communities that Black folks aren't really at risk for osteoporosis. Dr. Tammy, what you say about that? Oh, you're on mute. Tammy, are you on?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm like, yeah.
Well, you know, I hear a lot about our bone density in the community and a lot of misinformation, even like we don't think we're at risk for osteoporosis.
Right, we don't.
Yeah, you know, and as we've been talking about this, you know, Dr. Mo, I keep saying that osteoporosis is promoted as an old white woman's disease, right? That we don't get that. We don't have to worry about it. And something that Dr. Keith always says about, you know, oh, well, we're big boned, and so we don't have to worry about, you know, all of those things. And that couldn't be the furthest from the truth.
Yeah.
But to Dr. Mo and Dr. Keith, you know, when I was listening to Susan's story this time, and I've heard her story several times, and each time I'm just wowed at how big her story is and how much you have had to endure and experience. And so I'm just sending you mad love, mad love. I'm grateful you're still here, and I'm hopeful for a day that your pain is minimal to none. So I'm crazy enough to believe that that can happen. But I had a benign hemangioma in my spine about 9 years ago. And so as we're having this conversation, I'm wondering, is there a correlation in all of this? Because I had a spinal surgery. I mean, I have an erector set in my spine now holding it together, but they had to do an emergency surgery because when this was discovered on an x-ray from a fall, I didn't even know that it was going on. I didn't know. So is there any I mean, Claire, Dr. Mo, Dr. Keith, is there any correlation? Uh-oh. Did I
No.
stop everybody?
Any
Uh-uh.
question?
Doctors,
Is
I
there
don't
any-
know about the correlation.
I was just,
Between a hemangioma and osteoporosis? Is that the question?
Well, a compression fracture, because I had a hemangioma that caused a compression fracture. They say
Okay.
that was the cause of the compression fracture.
but see, the key thing is weakening of the bones. That's your central mechanism, pathophysiology, in this case, the cause.
Mhm.
Is if your bones gets weakened. So if you have a tumor or a mass that's weakening the area, so it was a vascular like tumor, and they had to, so it's weakening the bones. And
Mhm.
so the bones aren't doing what they're supposed to do. So if you have something like a mass there, like a tumor, then you think that they're not behaving appropriately, because the bones are first thing, they're alive.
Right.
Second thing is they're cells that maintain a balance. There's one group of cells that build the bones up, and there's one group of cells that tear the bone down. Now, once this equilibrium is changed by a mass or a tumor, you can have continued breakdown of bone and not have a lot of bone buildup.
Right.
And so from a general perspective, if they made that statement, that's probably the major reason. The bone wasn't doing what it's supposed to do. Its job is to maintain a balance between building bone up and cutting bone down. And you had something in there that's not even supposed to be there doing what it's doing. So now that whole area is weakened.
Wow.
Wow. Claire, you were going to say something, babe.
No, I was just going to say that I wasn't sure of the tumor aspect of it, but yeah, like Dr. Keith said, there was a weakening of the bone, and as you just said, Dr. Keith, people don't know that that bone is living tissue, and
Yeah.
that it remodels, as you said, it breaks down and builds up over and over and again in our lives. And as Susan, as you pointed out, and again, I'll add mine, it's heartbreaking to hear your story, and you had like a tsunami of things going wrong.
Right. God bless her.
All of this. It's just unreal how much you had to do that. And oftentimes people say, and we describe it ourselves sometimes as a silent disease. And then I hear from people like you who say there is nothing silent about the pain and suffering I'm going through. And it's because, many people don't, experience the bone loss or understand they have bone loss until they fracture, until there is that, that catastrophic incident that lets them know, oh, it's been happening inside me this whole time and I didn't know. So I think that's kind of some of the basic education we have to do. And then, like you all have said, there's just lack of knowledge about the importance of bone health across the spectrum, from us as individuals and then our clinicians. There's not a lot of training done in your basic medical school about osteoporosis. Just, it's general.
Very
And
true.
we've overworked our primary care clinicians to death, really, in many cases. And like you said, they just don't have the time to be up on everything that's happening. And so we need those specialists, the endocrinologists, the rheumatologists, but oftentimes, again, we don't see those specialists. We go to our primary care and we expect that they know it all. And they know bits of it, right? They know a little bit, but my mom fractured a hip at 81. And we see the same primary care physician, and he did not tell my mother never got a bone density test from him after that. And she had multiple fractures. And it was just kind of serendipitous that I ended up working at, the Bone Health and Osteoporosis Foundation a couple of years after that, where we said, wait a minute. And I had that kind of really frank conversation. You never sent my mom for a bone density test after these fractures.
Is there,
You have a lot of older patients. You need to now be aware, right?
Right. Right.
If you fall over the age of 50 and break a bone, you need to get a bone density test.
Let me pull Melissa in because, sorry, go ahead, Dr. Keith.
Yeah, I just said, so that interchange with that was your primary care doctor.
My mothers, yeah.
Yes. And there was no discussion. I don't know where they're missing it, because it's on the exam.
No shared
there
decision
was-
making,
There's
nothing.
nothing.
Yeah,
You hit
my
back-
mother, same thing. My mother broke her shoulder, her arm out of her socket. She never had a DEXA scan, and she's had 3 knee replacements. So,
It's unconscionable to me. I don't
Sorry.
understand that.
right, and she's never had a DEXA scan. I know I'm working on that because I'm gonna get, we got one scheduled for a couple weeks from now, but yeah, I don't know. And also the whole concept, like, how'd you get to an endocrinologist? Like, what is an endocrine? I thought they did diabetes, like.
Parathyroid is a hormone. It is an endocrine issue, and it's something that should be at some point managed by an endocrinologist. Once that parathyroid level, those calcium levels creep up, you really do need to see a specialist in it, because like Dr. Keith said, it's a dynamic balance, it's a delicate balancing act. Melissa, I've heard breasties say that, I'm not on that estrogen blocker, so I don't have to worry about my bone density or about osteoporosis, and I think there's a misnomer even in the breast cancer community that if you are not on anti-estrogen therapy, you don't have to really worry as much about your bones or about osteoporosis. Is that something that you've heard or maybe a myth you've had to dispel?
Absolutely. It's interesting. I was actually just speaking with a Thriver friend of mine today, and she's young, she's 39, and she's like, I'm going to get a DEXA because I heard that radiation could have an impact. So, there are so many, when you're talking about breast cancer treatment, surgery, all that stuff takes such a toll on your body overall. And I can only imagine what it does to your bones. There's probably things that we don't even know. So I think, probably the best rule of thumb is if you've been diagnosed with breast cancer, for sure you should have a DEXA scan. I always say, if I could turn back the hands of time, I'm almost 10 years since my triple negative breast cancer diagnosis. I really wish that when I was diagnosed that I had a baseline, because I do have osteopenia, and I'll never know if that's just the normal, Mother Nature, or if that is because of chemo, and just to have that basic, benchmark of, hey, this is my normal, just like anything else, like getting up that baseline mammo. I feel like it should be. You guys probably all agree it should be protocol, whatever that age that is. And I know we've talked about this. There's age, there's risk factors, but I wish there could be that certain time where, oh, okay, it's time for your DEXA, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, because I never had one as care. I had it because of my cancer, Claire. I had it when I had cancer, but you have so many scans. I didn't know what the hell was going on. I didn't know what a DEXA scan was, and nobody told me. And
Oh yeah, when you're diagnosed with cancer,
Yeah. No,
unless
like 6
it's like,
years later, I said, what is this thing I'm getting? Because I was sort of done with scans, but no one explained it to me that my bones were at risk at all, at all.
There was a question I want to ask Susan. Susan, are you lactose intolerant?
I had issues when I was younger. I wouldn't say that I'm lactose intolerant because I can still eat ice cream and stuff, but
Did that change? Does that change how you ingest dairy products?
What do you mean by that?
If it's uncomfortable, you kind of control your ingestion of dairy products like milk or.
Yes. Like I don't typically just drink regular milk.
Mhm.
We
Well-
have lactate milk in our house because of my daughter, so I tend to drink that. But I do have cheese. I do have ice cream, and I'm okay with it.
Well, the reason why I bring it up, because that's an important point, is that a large percentage of the US population is lactose intolerant. And if you really want to push it, and that's why I said that we have to be careful about the concept of generalization. Okay, we are a society of multiple cultures with multiple backgrounds from different parts of the globe. And what African Americans, Black women may not recognize is that there's a high incidence of lactose intolerance in the population. And if that's the case, there's less calcium ingestion. So, and I believe that the reports, over 50, 60 million people in the United States are lactose intolerant. And
75% of African Americans are lactose intolerant.
75%. And so that's going back to your doctor. That's a bit of information. So Susan's story is so important because everybody's going, and I think Melissa, the whole point about your friend who had radiation, saying that I'm worried about my bones, versus going back earlier when a young woman becomes in late or early 30s, when now her bone density starts to decline. There has to be either, and I've said it before, doctors are your consultants. So you're going to have to then query them, ask questions about them so that they can help you better manage it. But at least you got to have a starting point. And that's why, Gil, it was, Claire, it was, it's very important to have this educational resource about bones. Just that simple thing, a lactose intolerant.
Yeah. There's so much. The other thing I was thinking, Susan, as you were talking about your hysterectomy, which then puts you into early menopause. And the other thing that we've all been talking about, that people don't know, is that when women enter menopause, you can lose up to 20% of your bone density in the first 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
So regardless of what your bone density was, you could be going great. And then when you hit menopause, you automatically have a decrease. And as you said, Dr. Kidd, there's a little bit of decrease, as we age, that's kind of normal, but that drop off that women have is why osteoporosis is seen as an older women's disease, because we have a dramatic loss, whereas men, it doesn't really kick in until their 70s when they start to see that kind of osteoporosis loss. So you had the combination between parathyroid and then again the loss of estrogen with your hysterectomy early, where you didn't have another 10 years of estrogen to be able to keep bones going well. I mean, there's so much, but that's also something, Melissa, as we talk about, where the cancer patients, depending on what they're going through and what are some of the other things, sometimes there is that combination, breast cancer and then hysterectomy and removing the ovaries, and this puts them into menopause, and that it's not discussed. It's
because
just
that cancer treatment is basically a chemical menopause.
Exactly.
Well, that was my experience. I was 39 and I had a complete hysterectomy at 40. So I was kicked into early menopause. I was on the hormone replacement therapy because my tumor was estrogen positive. I did have the DEXA scan. I do have osteopenia. So, and what makes this hard, if I go back to your question, Dr. Mo, about primary care physicians and, the onus that we are putting on them. I mean, if you have gone into a doctor's office in 2022, all the things, and you bring in a patient like myself, I won't even bring Susan's story into the doctor's office, but if you bring a patient who's got a complex medical history and they have 10, 12 minutes per patient, 15 on a good day, and to try to check all of the boxes, I feel like we've got to talk about a better way. Yes, the primary care physicians, but they're humans too. And their schedules are packed, jam-packed with just patient. I mean, I've talked to physicians that see 20 to 25 patients a day.
Yeah,
I
40. Some of them see 40. But let me ask you this though, for the postmenopausal, well, anybody can answer because I don't call anybody's age out here. But who gave you, what toolkit did you get at the start of menopause that says, here's how to boost your bone density? Here's what you need to know about vitamin D and calcium, right? Or was it like, let me look it up, or I guess I'll do this chewable thing, or I heard vitamin D was good for the immune system and COVID, and the monkeypox, I guess I'll take some vitamin D. Who talked to you about any of these things? And Reverend Tammy, I think that's kind of where the primary care, not the primary care doctor, but primary care as an entity,
right?
Yes.
Helping women through that transition, right?
Right.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? How many of us actually go to the doctor and complain about menopause till you're way in it, right? I mean, you don't know you're in menopause, like your period stops, and they're like, what happened? You missed one. Like, first you think you're pregnant, right? And then you're like, right? And then you like sort of go this, and then you get I just got really cranky, and I said, I am not myself. And that's what took me to the doctor, but I was probably a year in by then, right? So no one's prepared me for menopause. It's not like even when you're a teenager and we prepare our young women for, you're going to get your period soon, you know, but no one talks about menopause. My doctor didn't. And I was having annual checkups. And then all of a sudden you're in it. And I was just an evil person. And that wasn't stuff.
Yeah,
And
and
that's what the
similar,
doctor.
similar to Tammy, I was 39.
Right.
When I found out that I was BRCA positive, my oncologist said, by the time you're 40, I'd like you to have your ovaries removed. And I was like, well, I don't want that to be my 40th birthday present. So I did it when I was 39. But I remember just being so focused on not getting breast cancer that I wasn't asking, well, what is that going to, what kind of
Is that gonna
impact
have
on
a
bones?
Well, yeah, I wanted to say one thing. I'm a little bit harder on the primary care, and I say this respectfully, and I say that to our country respectfully. Between 2000 and 2010, that was the decade of the bones.
Really?
And we're
Why?
having this discussion. It was
All those milk commercials. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Got milk. Yeah.
And so it wasn't like, we're not talking about the commercials. We're talking about the federal government. NIH said this is the bone and joint decade, 2010, 2000, from 2000, 2010. And right now, it's frustrating because we're still having this discussion and women are not being educated. And sometimes I always wonder, is it for show? Are we really trying to be preventive, providing adequate preventive care? And I'm hard because no matter how you look at it, Dr. Mo, you used to be a resident and you know that problem list. Tick, 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 tick. And I'm just saying, Reverend Tammy Denise, that's what we're supposed to do. A checklist, check the box. And if there's no answer, you can move on. That's the basics that we have to follow as clinicians, checking that box. And I can't say you got 15 minutes, I can find out if I'm checking my boxes.
One of the things I think we can advocate for too is that there are some hard stops and fail safes in the EMR, just like smoking cessation, just like getting your colonoscopy, just like, getting your mammogram. Like physicians are prompted in their electronic medical record to ask these things.
Right.
And I think that it's not a hard thing to say, hey, in Epic, can we put a hard stop where the medical assistant checking the patient in has to say, when's the last time you had your bone density checked? Or has anybody talked to you about bone density? And there's a way, I think, to advocate for that on the part of our communities, because that creates more equity, because now it's in there and you got to either bypass it or you got to address it. But that's something we could do.
Yeah.
It's that when we talk about, it's not, unfortunately, there's nothing healthful about our health system. It's a sick system. We treat sick people. And as you say, Dr. Keith, we don't do preventative. There's very little preventative. There's no time for preventative because we're dealing with whatever's happening for those sick people. And then the EHRs, we've talked about a million years. Why isn't it in there that there's a check thing? Well, that costs money. You have to get Epic to agree to put that in, right?
See, I want to say something. I want to say something like, but guess what? It can be done because we did it for prostate cancer. So if you are a Black male or a male with high risk for prostate cancer, age 40 is when you start to screen. Check it, flag comes up. So if they can do a flag for prostate cancer, they can do a flag for bone health.
Yeah, but we need to figure that out, right? And until we get the powers that be that say, yes, we're going to add this into the system so that everybody can do that. We've been trying to do it around in simple ways, but I think I've said the same thing for the last 10 years at the Bone Health and Osteoporosis Foundation. Have we gone directly to the big makers of those systems and said, update this, put these flags in, because it's costing. We have all the data now that says how much it costs, and then back to menopause, we said like the decade of the bone and the stuff. So I left the BHOF briefly in 2009 to found the National Menopause Foundation because there was no patient advocacy organization for women in menopause. There was no education. There was the North American Menopause Society, which is fantastic people, wonderful information, lists of people that you can reach out to, clinicians who are trained in it. But that's not where patients are, where a woman's going to. The fact that 2019, there's a nonprofit for everything.
Everything.
There was not a nonprofit for women at menopause in 2019 is awful. I'm glad that I created it and there is now, and now there are more and we're getting more things, but it's going to take that time. And like you said, overall, the connection between menopause and all of heart disease, cancer,
Mhm.
osteoporosis,
Yeah.
that there is not enough done about that is really a frustration. And we have so much work to do collectively and
Yes.
as women to advocate for ourselves and say, this is no longer acceptable.
Yes,
We are
exactly.
demanding that
We
you
have to ask for it. We have to
study
ask.
this and
And that's why I wanted to make sure you heard it, because they can do it if they want to. Now, we just did it at a practice level. So we went into a practice in the Maryland area who had covered multiple areas of the state,
that's great.
and they incorporated. So if they want, even if the large company doesn't do it, but those practices can do it. If they have an IT department, they can do it.
Yeah, you guys, let me give you some facts, okay? We looked this up. So 35% of Black women are estimated to have low bone mass. So I'm not sure if they mean osteopenia yet, but it's a pathway to osteoporosis. That's 35%, huge number, right? And again, I said earlier, 75% of African Americans are lactose intolerant. Of course, Harper's going to bark me. Black women's calcium intake is 50% less than the recommended dietary allowance. And it's because of lactose intolerance, or they're not, whatever, they're not eating enough cheese and drinking enough milk. And then the vitamin D thing, and you can do this in a second. Many Black women don't get enough vitamin D, which makes it hard for the body to absorb the calcium. So it's not only the calcium, it's the vitamin D, right? And then we're less likely to get screened. We know that we're less likely to receive medication to treat osteoporosis, definitely prevent it. But of course, here we go with the mortality stuff. Black women have a significantly different 1 year post-fracture outcomes compared with white women. 38% higher incidence of mortality 1 year after a fracture, 42.2% rate of debility, and 185% higher rate of destitution. So we can't do our jobs, we can't live. Those are crazy numbers. So if you don't think this is affecting you, it is, and it could. So what should we tell people? I mean, what should we tell people? What should they be doing?
Should they be running to their PCPs and asking for vitamin D levels, Dr. Keith? Because I know that a lot of people are asking for vitamin levels now. And I don't want us to get, derailed, but it's a valid question because people are concerned whether or not they're getting enough vitamin D too.
It's a very important thing that you say, is because we brought up if a person is not ingesting enough calcium, because really, if you're under 50, you're supposed to have 1,000 milligrams of calcium. And how many people are taking 1,000 milligrams of calcium?
Right.
And
Right.
now we're in this period of COVID or post-COVID or almost out of COVID, however you want to describe what we're in, where people were isolated for 2 years, didn't have access to the sun. And then we move into just the African-American population, or people that have a darker skin complexion. They are not out in the sun, so they're not converting enough sunlight into vitamin D. So when you have that physical, it would be very important to ask your doctor, could you just check my vitamin D level?
Check my vitamin D, check my calcium.
Yeah.
So
Well,
can I
Dr.
chime in on
Alexia,
that?
huh?
May I chime in on that with regard to the vitamin D level? So, I mean, I don't want this conversation to turn into ho-hum, terrible healthcare system in America, but it is
Hello.
what it is. But I mean, and asking your doctor to check your vitamin D levels, sometimes it depends on your insurance. Your insurance may not cover that
Right.
test. And
Getting there, Reverend Tammy, you're right.
Right. And I'm
Right.
like, because I have personally paid $200+ for that test because I wanted to know my vitamin D levels, but who can afford to do that? And, and on a regular
Right.
basis, in addition to your blood work. So
Well,
hey,
let me ask you a question. But I'm not saying it will, to have that discussion, that shared decision-making discussion. Doctor, I'm concerned about my bones.
that was no problem.
I want my vitamin D level test. Well, your insurance company doesn't. Well, if my insurance company doesn't test it, what do I need to do?
Right.
The doctor often doesn't know. I found out at the lab that the lab is the place that I found out that it wasn't covered. And I had to go back to my doctor to inform my doctor. So it's
Wow.
a broken system. You know, I feel like we're on a bike and we're saying, I want these wheels to work, but spokes are missing, the inner tube is flat. And so it's still a bike, it still has wheels, but it's not working.
It's not
And
going
that's
anywhere.
why this show is so important, because you just got off the bike, you picked up the manual, said, oh, this is Tammy Denise's manual. Okay, I need to talk to this person, this person, this person. If you know you're supposed to talk.
But Dr. Keith, I feel like the people on this show right now, we're anomalies. The women that I serve through Carrie's Touch, they are more concerned about feeding their families. The calls
right.
we get on a daily basis, these women are trying to not be homeless tomorrow. They
Right.
care less about their bones right now or even
Right.
cancer treatment, right?
That,
Can I-
that
can I ask
speaks
a
to
quick-
the
can I ask a quick-
financial toxicity of the
Yeah.
cancer,
But
of
can I ask a
cancer
quick-
treatment.
But
Go
can I
ahead,
ask a
Dr. Keith.
quick, can I ask a quick question? If they listen to your show, they learn. They're saying they learn, they've heard it. I'm not saying
Right.
medicine is perfect. I'm not saying it's perfect, but the more and more you talk about it, the more and more you convey the importance of your bones. And if you fracture a bone, your quality of life is changing.
You get that
Oh my
chemo
God.
a lot of
Oh
times.
my
You can't- you
gosh,
don't
I can't.
qualify for certain clinical trials. There's certain medications that you cannot have if you
Yeah.
have missing teeth and bones that are injured. You know that your chemotherapy options can be limited. But you know, Reverend Tammy, and I guess let's pull Melissa in too, and let's talk a little bit about the nutritional aspects of things, because cancer care as well takes its toll on nutrition. But there might be something that we could do to
Do differently.
support. To nutritionally support these women who are really there trying to figure out how to feed their families, but even through their food pantries, through programs that offer, you know, fruits and vegetables and nutritional supplementation, maybe there's something we can do to sort of increase the amount of calcium and trace minerals and vitamin D in the diet. And so who's talking about those things?
Right.
Well, we do have a registered dietitian that works with Carrie's Touch and has worked with us for probably the past 10, 12 years, that we talk about these things regularly. We do try to provide supplements to different patients, but that's a small population, right? That's just a few folks. And when I say few, I'm, you know, talking hundreds of folks a year, but that's still just a few folks that are being addressed in this much larger pool of people. And I want to just go back to the voice of the patient, that when we're doing all of this stuff, really, you just want to not feel like crap that day. And we are anomalies, the Susans of the world, the Rickies of the world, the Melissas of the world. We fight back when we don't have anything in us to fight back. Right. I was sick with chemo from my very first chemo treatment. I went into the parking lot after treatment and puked my guts out and puked for the next 10 months. Right. So I was sick. My oncologist said, you're the sickest patient I've had in 20 years. I was sick. But I knew I wanted to live, not just for myself, not just for my family. I wanted to live for moments like this, to be a voice for those who can't, won't, and don't know how to fight for themselves. And those are the people we've got to look at when we're having these conversations. We can't have the conversations from the ivory tower of access. We've got to get back down to the grassroots and the people who are struggling, who are going bankrupt. I mean, Susan getting a loan to put a pool in that she can only get relief for half a year. But what she was doing was saying, I just want to have a normal day.
Right.
I know at the national level, at least for younger people, I mean, we're talking about, you know, how the bone impacts us after we reach a certain age. The one thing we didn't mention is that you build all the bone, the densest bone you're going to get from adolescence, childhood through mid 20s. So
Right.
those are the people that are watching and listening. It's our children and our grandchildren that we really need to start working on.
Right.
I know at the federal level, there was an attempt to get supplements included in the SNAP program so that underserved populations could actually, they should get a multivitamin. They should be able to get a multivitamin for kids who aren't getting nutrition. And that wasn't covered under the system. You know, the things, the practical things, as you said, Rankema, that we don't think about and that are so important. How are you expecting them to get enough calcium and vitamin D if there's no rich food sources in there, and then they can't use the SNAP program to get a multivitamin for their child? So there are many things we need to do to change this system as best we can. And you know, that instant relief, unfortunately, for Susan and for all of you that have suffered through so much through your treatments, you know, that's gonna, you're here to advocate for the people who come after so that we do a better job with them. But then together, collectively, we need to do a better job for them.
Yes.
Like those of us who have this voice and coming together to share this information, hugely important, but also coming together as you all have done in your organizations under the Bone Health Policy Institute so that we can actually affect change, that we can really make sure that those who are making these decisions for us hear from us. And as you said, it's not the patients going through it who are going to be able to advocate like that. They're sick, trying to live, right? So those of us who are survived and are healthy need to do it on their behalf.
And you know what? I got to add one more thing. Thank you so much for that, Claire. But how many Black women that I even know are walking around with some pain in their back, with back pain? Hello. And we just put it aside. Okay, I can't deal right now. I must have stretched a muscle. I must have picked up the baby the wrong way. I must have picked up the grandbaby the wrong way. I mean, I live with biofreeze in my bathroom, man, you know, from my grandkids, but how many of us have pain that could be osteoporosis and we don't even know it? We don't even think, it's not even our frame of reference that this could possibly be something wrong with us. Because thank God it's not.
It's for older people. It's
for older people. Yeah, it's for older people. I'm getting old, so I'm having pain, and I probably did the wrong thing, twisted the wrong way, slept the wrong way on the pillow, whatever. But we're all like kind of excusing away something that could be treated or at least diagnosed, right?
I want you to just speaking on that, like to be a little hopeful. You know, Susan, you talked about bringing out the big guns of the newer medications. Again, when our organization started 40 years ago, the medications were just starting. There weren't any, and they started to build. And like you said, now we've got big guns, and that percentage that you have improved in bone set is really unheard of. I mean, really, it is amazing, and we're so grateful that there are these treatments. And I think that's something for patients who are suffering right now to know, right? That the osteoporosis treatments, I mean, yes, diet and nutrition essential to being able to maintain bone health. You said get to the point though where your bones are strong enough to have surgery should you fracture again and have another, you know, kyphosis thing. That's the kind of thing that we need to work with. And what people don't understand is that osteoporosis medications are more fruitful and work better than heart disease medications, than many cancer medications. I mean, they're really successful, and yet we have an 80% care gap in people taking them, right?
Okay.
Again, 80% care gap. What is that? Say that again. Explain that.
It means that of the people who should be on an osteoporosis treatment or have been diagnosed with osteoporosis beyond treatment, 80% are not taking a treatment for it.
And that was interesting, Ricky, because that was one of the things that was also noted about Black women is that once diagnosed, they're not even getting treated for something that could be treated for.
Right.
And
you know, the whole pain, don't even get me started on the whole Black woman pain thing either, you know.
Right.
So,
and the stat Black women get diagnosed with osteoporosis less, but the outcomes are much worse.
Much worse.
Again, that is that health system problem. We have to do a better job.
So Medicare covers a DEXA scan. I think Part B.
It does. Medicare, the Welcome to Medicare packet does have a DEXA scan in it. So women over 65 can get a DEXA. But again, we've already talked about why in that instance it's not good enough. But yes, all women, anybody can get a DEXA. I think for men it's 70, and that's covered under Medicare. But people aren't using that, clearly. And then, you know, what we have to fight for too is then once you're on the treatment, the only way to know if it's working, like in Susan's case, is to have another DEXA. You know, and do you want to wait 2 to 5 years, which is what the Medicare covers, to be able to get your follow-up DEXA? No, you want to have it a year from now to say, oh, it's working, great, you know? So there's that. But yes, even again, if you are 65 or older and you're on Medicare and you haven't had a DEXA, talk to your doctor about getting a DEXA. You are entitled to a DEXA under Medicare. And for everyone
Dr. Alexia, oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah. Dr. Alexia in our chat said she's getting such pushback from insurance companies, you know, for patients who need osteoporosis meds. Are there things that we can do at the level of the primary care physician who is recognizing and trying to be proactive and trying to prescribe what it is a patient needs? What do we have for these doctors, and what do we say to folks who are experiencing this as well? They read, they research, they watch a show, they go see their doctor, they got osteoporosis, and now they think, okay, here's what I should get, but they say, no, sorry, you can't get that.
Yeah. So we
Wow.
have on the Bone Health and Osteoporosis Foundation website, I'd encourage patients and clinicians to go there. We're unique in that we actually do clinical education in addition to patient education and outreach and the leading stuff. So we do have some stuff that will be very helpful for clinicians if they just want to go to that. You do have to spell out bonehealthandosteoporosis.org.
I'm going to put that in the comments, bonehealthandosteoporosis.org.
Yeah. So we can help with some of that. We have a coding guide that helps clinicians when you're trying to do post-fracture care. You know, what are some of the things that you can do to do that? As well as patients, we have a checklist on what should you ask your doctor? What do you need to know, et cetera.
So what do you do if you're not 65? Is it covered in Medicaid?
It depends. If you're on Medicaid, you can do it. There are, again, based on your risk factors, your clinician should, if you have a high risk for fracture, your doctor should be able to get your DEXA approved. They're going to have to do a little extra work though. And they're going to have to know what to do. And like you said, so sometimes it's not the primary care's fault. It's, you know, their guidelines say, I can't give you a DEXA, and they don't know, well, actually, if you do this, this, and this, it would be qualified, right? So we need to provide more education and support clinicians who are trying to do that. But if you have a high risk factor, push with your insurance company, have your clinician push with the insurance company, you should be able to get that DEXA.
So we need to let ladies know what the high risk factors are.
Yeah.
And it's kind of individual, but so, I mean, there's controllable and uncontrollable risk factors, and you guys can probably do this better than I can. The things we can't control, being a woman, right? Our loss of estrogen is going to do that. The family history of it, Susan, you mentioned that there wasn't a family history, but it is very hereditary. So if your grandmother or someone, or your grandfather, aunt, uncle, mother, anyone in your family broke a bone and had osteoporosis, particularly a hip fracture, you are at high risk. If
they shrunk, my mother shrunk.
That's right. So those are kind of stuff. Then there's other conditions. Again, Susan qualifies because of all the other comorbid conditions that she has that lead to bone loss. DEXA should be covered to be able to identify that. The breast cancer community that's watching, that puts you at a higher risk for fracture.
Right. Wow.
And there was one thing about the familial aspect or the genetic aspect of it. And it's going to be very important as we move forward that it's not gender restricted when it comes to the genes that play a role in fracture or osteoporosis. If your father had osteoporosis, you, the daughter, could be at risk for osteoporosis, even though you developed it. It was developed in the male, in a family member, and vice versa.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Very similar in cancers, right? My father had colon cancer.
Yeah.
I have a higher risk for breast cancer, right?
Right.
So there are all those things. So you're absolutely, it's not gender specific. Anyone in your family who broke her hip or had osteoporosis puts you at higher risk.
At risk.
Wow.
How do we make the people with some hope, y'all?
I mean, this show is I know you're gonna beat me up, but I feel this show is so important because it provides hope. Because now this is a video recording that's in a video library that people can access and go back over and over again and say, well, what they say about that? And what are those things, those risk factors?
It'll be online. It's on our Facebook page.
No, I
We
agree. And
also
I think
outlined all of the work that still needs to be, there's a lot of work that we need to do. All
That's
of us.
true.
It's true, but I think it gives people questions to ask and gets them thinking, even if it's only to ask their loved ones, ask your mother, ask your aunt, your auntie, you know, when's the last time you got a DEXA scan? How we doing with bones? Are you taking your calcium and your vitamin D, Nana? And kind of check
Yeah.
in with each other, you know, and be a little bit accountable to and for each other. And if you don't get anything else from it, you know, I've been putting you all key takeaways into the chat so people can actually read some of what, you know, what we're saying here and take it with them. But checking in with each other, you know, and really focusing in on how we're doing and feeling, and that preventive health maintenance is something that we can't stress enough, especially coming out of COVID.
And especially remembering that nutritional component. I mean, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, mustard greens, kale, good sources of calcium. And then
And not milk. They're not milk, lactose free. Exactly right.
Some bok choy.
I'd rather have Brussels sprouts than milk anyway, right?
Absolutely.
Put a little bit of bacon on them.
Now we're talking. Now we're talking.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's it.
Wow, this has been awesome. We're going to put your contact information for your organizations, for your websites, all those things in the chat so that people can connect with them and with you to support you and join the initiatives that you all are presenting here with us today. This is incredible. We're blessed to have you and appreciate the conversation.
Thank you for this platform. Thank you, and to Ricky for this very, very necessary and important platform.
Yes, thank you for this opportunity for all of us to share our stories. And Susan, you have a fan club now, a huge one. We're so proud of you,
Me too.
and we're so glad that you're here and for sharing your story. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not just about a month, right? It's not just about a week, you know, it's about everyday lives and what people are going through. So we hope it's been relatable and reliable and real. It's what we set out to do every Wednesday night here on The Doctor Is In.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for our sponsors.
Thank you.
And we'll see you on Sunday. The Doctor's
Thank
In.
you. See you on Sunday. Thank you. Bless you guys. Thank you so much. Bless
Great
you,
to
love.
see you.
Bye.
Love. Bless
Great
you,
to see
love.
you.
Thank you.